Mastering the fundamentals of estimating will ensure you're not losing money. All right, so I'm going to be sharing with you the fundamentals of estimating. If you are a beginner estimator, new construction company owner, this video is going to be like a treasure trove of information for you. If you're more of experience, you've done a bunch of estimates and you've got a contracting business already for many years, this is going to help you really define the fundamentals and ensure that you're going to be profitable. As you know, so many jobs, you get to the end and you're like, where did the money go? You look at the bank and it's like, I was supposed to make 20, 30, 50, $100,000 of profit margin on this project. What happened? So this is going to help you with that. I'm going through with a full process of like where to start with an estimate all the way to the end, what to be thinking about it, what not to miss and forget, and just ensure that everything across the board, that you've got all the fundamentals in place so you can grow and scale and produce some amazing estimates. With estimating, if you ever heard the real estate term, you make your money when you buy a house, not when you sell a house, because if you bought it for the right price, you can always sell it for more later and make money. Estimating is the same thing. In a construction business, you make your money when you estimate. So make sure you're putting the time into it and making sure that your system and your process and the fundamentals I'm sharing with you here are very clear in your mind so that you've estimated a project effectively, and the fundamentals I'm sharing with you here are very clear in your mind so that you know that when you go to produce it, when you go to manage that project, when you go to turn over the keys to the client, that you are going to have made money on it because your estimating was in the right place. So does that make sense? Make sure to give this video a big thumbs, likes up. Super appreciate you for doing that. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't, but I'm sure you have. All right, so first point I'm going to go through, and like I said, this is from A to Z. So I've got, what is it, eight, somewhere in there, 8 points. And everyone is going to build off the next one. So you want to listen to and checking these all out in order. And the first one is the setup. So first thing when you get an estimate, I'm not going through the walkthrough process here of actually going to the client's house. This is more like the calculation nuts and bolts of producing an estimate. If you want like a walkthrough video of like how to be presenting yourself, I've got other playlists and videos on doing home walkthroughs and the sales process and all that kind of stuff. So first one here is the setup, how to get set up. So you're going to want to get your plans in place, your measurements, any photos you've taken of the project. So whatever information you want to gather that. You want to be using some sort of software here. If you're just starting out, a spreadsheet will work. I say don't, waste your time building out spreadsheets and using spreadsheets. You may as well just go purchase a proper project management or estimating software. There's lots of great ones out there. Again, I've got videos on tech stacks and which software to pick for that. So go check that out after this video. But be using some sort of software because it's going to have a lot of built-in features. It's going to save you a ton of time and it's well worth the cost that you're going to pay for, having a professional grade project management software. So setting up, you want to have templates in place. You want to have your software in place, gather all your information, get everything ready, get a good understanding of the project. So second point I'm going to be touching on here is labor. This is where majority of contractors lose money, is by misestimating, underestimating labor cost, not understanding how much time something's going to take. Estimating, this is going to take 15 hours. It ends up taking 20. Now you're out money. So the way to mitigate this is to make sure that you are charging the labor rates. And I've got a labor rate calculator that can help you with this. Other videos, again, like I've got videos on all this stuff. So if you want specifics, drop a comment below. Let me know what you need, and then I'll send you a video on it, or go check out my other videos. But let's say you've hired someone, or maybe yourself, you're charging you're paying yourself or an employee, let's say $40 per hour. Probably going to be charging that out to the client at least 60 to 80. If it's like paying someone 25, it's probably going to be about 50. It's probably about double whatever you're paying is the labor rate you're going to be charging to client. This is going to cover all your employee burden. So this is, your taxes and all that stuff. And I'm not going to get into those calculations, but just be aware of that. So it's got to cover all the burden of the taxes and all the overhead that it comes with having an employee, as well as some margin in there of buffer so that, if you're paying a guy 25 and you're charging out at 35, you're essentially losing money every hour that they're working because your burden rate is going to be higher than $10 an hour. I'm quite sure on that. And if they, there's no buffer if they go overtime or anything, or if they, something happens, they don't show up or this or that. So make sure you have a buffer in there. So what you're charging the client has probably about, I would say anywhere from 30 to 40% above your burden rate. So again, if your cost plus burden is $40. You should be charging out probably about $60 or even more possibly per hour. And then when you do actually figure out the time, so for labor, a lot of it is going to be, especially if you're beginning, you probably don't have a lot of actual data to work on from past projects. Hopefully you have your own experience of like working on past projects, but essentially what I do is I go through kind of a picture video model in my head. So if I think like, okay, we're going to be renovating this kitchen, we got to rip out the old cabinets, we got to take out the old vinyl floor, maybe we're going down to studs, we need to remove drywall. So just think through your head of like, let's say you've got a crew of 2 guys or 3 guys. How many days of work is that? And if I think it's going to be like 3 days of work for 2 guys, I automatically add an extra, probably anywhere from 30% or more hours to that because they're going to have job setup. They're going to have to drive back and forth. Maybe they forgot a tool. Maybe a guy called in sick one day. Maybe, they took a longer lunch or whatever one day. Maybe the cabinets were nailed and glued and screwed and some crazy DIY guy, went to town with assembling them. So there's all these like other factors that come in. So make sure you're overestimating on labor because everything generally takes longer than expected. There's going to be a balance here because if you just go crazy with it, obviously your pricing is going to be like extremely high and the probability of getting the project is going to be lower. But don't shortchange yourself on labor and make sure if you are going high on something, labor is the thing that you want to be high on because no pun intended there. Get high on labor rates because that'll get you high on profit. And we will move on to the next point right away. So number 3 here is materials. So calculating materials, this is a lot easier in labor because generally you're going to know how much things are costing. You're going to need 30 2x4s. You go check out the price for 2x4s and you multiply it and there you go. So if you're using a proper project management software, usually they have built-in databases where you can check, RS means or build one or some of these databases that'll tell you how much things cost as far as like materials go. You can also break this out by packages. So if you're doing like new home builds and generally framing package is going to cost you, I don't know what the rate would be, but let's say it's cost you $30-$40 per square foot generally for a framing package for a standard bungalow or what have you. Then you can just do like a simple multiplication for a framing package. If it's more of like a renovation type and you're getting more into like the specifics of like how many pieces of lumber do I need, how much of this or that do I need, make sure that you're checking current prices and have like a database again with your project management software. And always make sure that you're using like at least 15 to 20% additional for waste. So let's say you figured out tile flooring, you need 300 square foot of tile for the floor. You're going to times that by an extra 20% at least. I find tile is something that don't want to run short on and is really not a good place to go. Plus, you're going to have different die lots and they may be out of stock. So, certain material, if you know it's going to be hard to get or difficult to run to get more, over order on that stuff. If it's things like lumber, very standard materials, probably like a 15% waste is generally good enough and you can run with that number. So, will that make sense for materials again? So, moving on, is this making sense so far? Labor, materials, number 4, we've got subcontractors. So, there's like a whole kind of science or process or art, whatever you want to call it, to like how you do estimates, whether you drill them down very specific or you just kind of give multiplier pricing like a rough budget and then later you drill it down depending how much time you want to spend creating a proposal. That aside, I've got other videos on that. Number 4, for subcontractors, what you want to be having in place is a request for bid or request for quote. There should be some sort of a standard document, standard scope of work that you're sending to every trade. And the reason you want this is because you don't want to just send them a set of plans and say, hey, can you estimate the electrical on this project? Because every electrician is going to send you a different scope of work and probably different pricing that's quite a bit, out to lunch as far as like from one to the other. Whereas if you send them a document, I want wiring, we want pot lights, these are the light fixtures, this is this type of panel we're using, you don't need to supply this, we'll supply that, don't worry about garbage or whatever. And this is like what you need to leave the site clean, send me the scope of like the schedule of how long this is going to take. So have some sort of standard document that outlines all that so that when you send it out to 3 different electricians or 2 different electricians, your main guys, they know, okay, they're quoting on this and they're quoting on this, so you can compare them apples to apples and have a much better idea of actually which one you want to go with. And it just makes the whole process that much easier. When you're choosing which pricing to put onto your estimate, do not go with the lowest bid. If you've got, like, let's say you've put it out to, three different contractors to bid, generally you're going to want to go with the middle pricing. And the reason for this is because if you go with the lowest bid on all of, your subcontractors just to try to lowball to get the job, and then you get the job, maybe that contractor is busy, maybe something came up and they can't do your project. Well, now you've got to go to the next contractor whose pricing, could be thousands or tens of thousands more, and you've estimated the project at this low point. Now you're going to be paying and you're going to be losing money on that. So that's why you always want to make sure that you can hire like the kind of the middle line, the average price, so that if something happens and you can't work with one of your main contractors, that you can find someone else to take on the project at, the price that you've estimated at, instead of lowballing and then losing money later on. Does that make sense? And then with subcontractors, when you are, doing requests for bids, if they don't reply to your email or don't call you or don't have any communication within, I would say, 2 days, give them a phone call. Subcontractors, tradespeople, they need to be called. They're busy. They got a ton of stuff to do. They're not used to, checking emails or being online and all this stuff. A lot of them, maybe they do, maybe got amazing trades and they respond very quickly. I hope they do. But if they do not, within 2 days, give them a call. Say, hey, did you receive my estimate, my quote? Generally, it's like, yeah, I received it. Haven't looked at it yet. I'll get to it, this weekend or in the next couple of days or whatever. Just make sure, because if you just send it to them and then you wait a week and they didn't see it or it didn't go through, it's going to take you weeks, if not months, to, get a quote back from them. So make sure you follow up with them. And then if they say like, yeah, I'll have it done, after the weekend, follow up with them on Monday if you don't see it and ask like, hey, you said you're going to get this quote in, are you still getting it in? You need to be proactive and really kind of give them a little bit of urgency. And if they are still like kind of dragging you on of like, yeah, I'll get it done, just tell them, hey, I've got a deadline this Wednesday, I'm closing the bids and you won't be considered for this project anymore. Or something like, hey, I'm meeting the client on Wednesday. I really need your pricing because I want to have you working on this project. So can you please get me your pricing before, Tuesday midday, so that I can include it with my estimate and get the pricing to the client. Something like that. So be communicative with them, be on their side, be proactive to get those quotes. Making sense? Number 5, moving on down the line here, takeoffs. So taking off from plans, this is a whole process and kind of skill in and of itself, because it's very easy to miss things. It's really bad when you miss things. I know I've estimated a lot of projects and I've made a lot of mistakes, and that's where I am, sharing this with you so that you don't make these mistakes and don't lose the money that I've lost on projects. Although I can think back very specifically to a one where I was estimating drywall and I was doing the takeoff using one of my takeoff softwares at the time, and I didn't realize it till later after I started the project, but I had forgot to, I think, include the drywall for, was it the ceiling? So I'd done a takeoff of the walls and maybe parts of the project. And then later, when I got my drywall contractor on to the project and he gave me his quote, I should have done this, got the bid sooner, the quote sooner from him. But essentially, I was out, I don't know, maybe 800 square feet of drywall, which really sucked a lot. Thousands of dollars worth of profits just kind of, vanished right there. So takeoff is really important, and be using a software again for this, because although I made the mistake, at least I could go back to my software and I could really easily figure out, what, it looks like I forgot to add the ceiling. Plus, when you have a team and you grow your business, or you already have a team and you're delegating your estimating, it's really important that different people can pick up the pieces of the puzzle, especially if you've got an estimator who hands it off to a project manager, is then you can go back and say like, oh, he forgot this, or this got forgot, or whatever. And if you're doing cost plus pricing, then you have some sort of thing that you can go tell the client like, sorry, I thought it would cost this, but it's actually going to cost this. I'm going to need to charge you, extra for that. Tough conversation, but needs to get done. So yeah, takeoffs, be methodical, go through it. Things like cabinets, you're generally going to do like lineal footage of cabinets. Again, everyone's going to kind of have their own way of doing things, but you're going to have 3 basic types of takeoffs. It's going to be lineal footage. So this will be things like gutters, baseboards. Those are kind of big ones that you're going to do lineal feet. Square footage is generally going to be things for like flooring, wall coverings, ceilings, things like that. Generally going to be square footage. Tiling is a big one. And then you're going to have areas not as common, but things like cubic yards of concrete or soil, those types of things. So those are going to be kind of your big main ones, as well as I guess there's a fourth one as well. And that's going to be your count. So how many windows, how many recessed lights, how many, I don't know, those are kind of how many doors, interior doors. So you can have a count, right? So those are the main kind of pieces of a takeoff that you're going to be using. And again, use software so you can bring in the PDF of the plans, and you can pick out certain things, and it's very easy then to see what's been estimated and what hasn't been. So that is the takeoff portion of an estimate. Moving on, you're at a really good place now. You've figured out your labor, your materials, you got your subcontractor bids coming in, and you got your takeoffs. The next big piece of the puzzle is markups. So a lot of guys, especially starting out, it's like, how much do I charge for markups? How do I know how much, do I do 15, 20, 25, 50% markup? What are my margins? What does that all mean? So I'm going to keep it really simple here. Generally speaking, if you are a general contractor, home builder, larger remodeler, then you're typically going to see markups anywhere from 15, 20, 25%, maybe more. If you are a trades business, maybe more of like a smaller, renovator, kitchens, bathrooms kind of thing, then your markups could be anywhere from 30, 50%. And one thing to keep in mind with markups is the way that I see it, and the mindset you need to have is, I want everything that is going to cost me money to be a line item on, even things that don't cost you money that you want to communicate to the client, is going to be a line item on the estimate. And things like that are often forgot is miscellaneous materials. So like I said before, with framing, you've got your framing package. Have another line item called, miscellaneous framing materials, or site materials, or something to that regard, because there's always going to be things that you forgot, or extra things that come up on a project. So have some sort of miscellaneous charges in there. Again, you can word it something different if you're getting pushback from clients, like, why am I paying for miscellaneous stuff? But it's always something that comes up, as well as project management. So you should be charging for project management, for supervising the project. And the way to calculate this is, if it's yourself, that's fine. If it's your project manager, even better. How many hours is it going to take to manage this project? So I don't like to have this in my markup, because the markup is going to be, depending if it's $100,000 or a $1 million project, the markup is going to be for your overhead and your profit, and it should just be for that. Project management is not an overhead, and it's not part of your profit. It is a line item, it's a cost for doing that specific project for that specific client. So if it's going to take, let's say on average, you spend an hour a day managing a project, or 2 hours a day managing a project's going to take 6 months. Well, you need to be charging 2 hours of labor, of project management labor time, to manage that project. And then project management fees, generally they're going to be anywhere from probably $70, $80 an hour up to $100, $120 an hour. So you want to make sure you're charging for that as a line item, and then your markup of whatever it is, let's say 20, 25%, is going to be on top of that labor cost. The reason you want to do this is because it gets you in the habit of thinking how long it's going to take, like as far as like time to manage the project. And this is everything from doing the estimate, doing the pre-construction planning, facilitating sub-trades, doing the communication, calling clients, dealing with anything to do with their project is included in this time. So it gets you into that mindset, and make sure you're estimating properly. And I'm going on about this because it's such a key point, and one that I see so many contractors not getting right time and time and time again. So if you get this point right, if all you get out of this video is this point, you are already probably like 50% of like the benefit, or you're going to get, is on this point. And you want to make sure that you've got that in there. And then the other reason is, when you hire a project manager, when you scale your business, you're going to need that in there, because you need to hire someone and pay them to manage the project. And if you're just working off margins and like using your markups as how you pay for the supervising, it's not a good combination. Like, you've got your equal sign, and you've got your, project management, and then the cost. That doesn't factor in if you've just got markup, because it's just based off like how much you're charging for the project. It's not a good relationship there. Another thing you need to keep in track of markups is figure out your overhead. I did this calculation not too long ago with a client, and we figured out that even though the overhead, like, it looked like they weren't, considering the amount of business they were doing, their overhead seemed reasonable, but we found out their overhead is actually about 15% of the revenue right now. So if they are charging a 15% markup, they've left $0 for profit. And that's something, if you haven't done that calculation, that's probably one of the reasons why you're finishing a project and not seeing any money back end, because you have not included anything over your overhead for profit, even though it seems like, oh, I'm charging 20% or 25%. Well, if your markup, or if your overhead is like 20% or 22%, you've only left like a 3% margin for profit. And if anything goes wrong in the project, that profit just vanishes, and now you're essentially paying someone to do their project for them. So is that making sense? I know I've got a lot of numbers and key ideas there, so you may want to rewind and watch this again, probably revisit this again sometime, but super important there. Check your overhead. If you're a new business and you don't know your overhead, just figure out essentially what's your expenses and overhead, and go check out some of the other financial videos that have that explained overhead. So still with me here, rambling on a little bit, but this is important stuff, and you're going to want to get every point because they are all cumulative. I've got two more to go. So the seventh point that I'm going to be touching on here is best practices. Some of the best practices for estimating is to have specific times. So you want to block some time for doing estimates. Often we get in a rush, and it's like you're trying to do estimating in the free time, and that free time never comes. So you end up estimating on evenings or on weekends. Block some time, sit down, get an estimate done, and get a couple done. Make sure you're blocking estimating. You're going to probably be doing estimates every week. If you've got a lot of leads coming in, block out a time every week that you're doing estimates. Keep that time, and it'll just make things so much easier. Instead of trying to do some like here when you got a little bit of time in the evening, another bit here when, like today's a little bit of a slow day, so I'm going to bugger off early. Set some time for specifically doing estimates, and that way you'll be able to tell clients of like, hey, I can have your estimate by this day, because on, let's say, Friday or on Tuesday, you're going to sit down, do 2 hours, and then you'll have the estimate done by Wednesday or Monday or whenever it is. That's definitely one of the best practices. Another best practice is when you've completed an estimate, go back to the top and review it again. Do a quick review. Does everything make sense? Did I forget anything? Did I leave anything out? Do a quick review yourself, and then have someone else review it with you to make sure you didn't forget anything. Like I said, you make your money when you estimate, so it is well worth your time to take an extra 5, 10, 15 minutes to review it. Make sure everything is clear, make sure that your pricing is right, and ask like your project manager, your crew foreman, someone else who's knowledgeable about construction. And even if it's like a crew foreman or a project manager, they're probably closer to the front line, and they know more, like specifically, especially for labor, like I mentioned before, where you can lose money. They're going to know better probably than you, because you've been off the tools for a while potentially, or they'll just have a better insight of like a second opinion of different things, or a second set of eyes. So make sure you're getting your estimates reviewed by someone else. Quick 5-10 review. Can you look over this, see if it makes sense, make any adjustments as needed, get that out. So the final point that I'm going to be touching on here, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, number 8 is proposals. So now you've got the estimate. Now you need to make a professional proposal, because you want to get that estimate sold. You want to get them to sign on the dotted line so you can start their project, create a new relationship with a new client. It's a beautiful thing. And having a good proposal and proposal process will get you there. So if you're using a project management software, typically they will have a proposal type template and an easy way to send an email proposal. I like to see a cover sheet. So you're going to have a page cover sheet. It's going to have a nice picture of a project you did, maybe a new house or a beautiful kitchen, something like that. Have their name, have a little write-up about your company. The proposal is a marketing document. You need to think of the proposal. This isn't just like a spreadsheet with, what it's going to cost them, because they're just going to compare that spreadsheet with the other spreadsheet or the other 2 or 3 or 4 other quotes that they got. They're all going to look the same, right? So that's why you want to have a cover page with some verbiage, why your company, is good to work with, the benefits for them. You're professional, you're qualified, you've got your licenses, you've got your insurance, you have warranty. Have some nice verbiage on the cover sheet. Then you're going to get into the estimate. So it's going to go through all the line items, the things that you've estimated, what it's going to cost for the potential clients. And at the bottom of the proposal, you want to make sure you have your terms and inclusions. So any kind of terms as far as, valid for 30 days, like the estimate's valid for 30 days, allowances, if they spend more, it'll be more. If there's change orders, what happens. So it's not a full contract, but it should stipulate at least like, we take a 20% deposit up front or whatever, like any kind of terms that are typical for a project that they should know about, include on there. Any inclusions, so things that are included, like a warranty, have your qualifications on there. We've got our business license, we're insured, we've been in business 10 years. So really, like, again, it's a marketing vehicle. Build up like why they should do business with you. Then exclusion. So, permits could be excluded, city service upgrades. If there's any specific things like environmental issues with mold or rot or structural issues, anything like that, you want to make sure you have exclusions. It's very clear, makes you look professional. And then you've got that beautiful proposal. Always present proposals live to your client. Do not stress this enough. Do not just email it out to them. If you're like working with like a larger developer or, another, it's like business to business and you've been in like a, business relationship for, a long time, then yeah, maybe you just want to email them because you already know them, but make sure you give them at least a phone call and talk about it. Have that personal touch. The numbers are the numbers. And people are going to go with who they trust, who they like, who they think is going to be the best fit. And if all you're doing is sending this page, that doesn't tell them anything, right? You need to be personally explaining, showing them, giving them your time, having that FaceTime. So if it's an important project, schedule a time to meet them in person. Go to their place, their home, their business, whatever it is. Meet them in person, show them the estimate, explain about it, see if they have questions, see if they need any revisions, give them that personal touch. If that is not possible, or if you've got a lot of projects, at the very least, schedule a Zoom call so that on the Zoom call you can go through it. Show them the bottom line first because that's what everybody wants to know, right? So if you're showing them in person or you're showing them on a Zoom call, go to the bottom line. This is going to cost you $275,000 to renovate your main floor of your house. Get that out of the way. If they're sticker shock, they'll be like, oh wow, that's more than I thought. Yeah, it's more than I thought too. So let's go through the items, make sure that I've got everything that you want, and maybe we can come up with a way to move forward with this project, or maybe you might like us to like change this to get inside your budget, whatever it is. So tell them that first because while you're going, if you don't show them the bottom price, the whole time you're explaining your process and the line items, all they're thinking of like how much this is going to cost me in the end. So get that out of the way. Do the Zoom call, like I said, if you can't meet in person, but at the very least, always have that personal touch. You will sell more projects. Be confident in your price, be confident in your product, do great work, and here's the best estimating you've ever done in your life.